Welcome to another episode of the Joe Cannon Health Podcast. Today we're joined by Cammie, and Cammie's going to talk about how she got exercise-induced rhabdomyolysis, but cause of it is a cause that I've never heard of before, and if I haven't heard of it before, most others probably haven't as well. So Cammie, if you could just take us through the whole scenario, how you got rhabdo, your initial consult with your doctor, and then your second consult with another doctor that
Yes.
finally uncovered what happened to you.
Yes. So going back, I've always had some issues with exercise. I've never quite been able to keep up. Cardio was always very hard for me. Recovery after cardio sessions was difficult. A friend of mine had begged me to go with her to, it was a local gym that does 45-minute really hardcore training sessions, and I think a lot of that is becoming more popular with CrossFit type things and boot camp places. But I finally broke down and said I'm going to give it a shot, and I made it through the workout. It was a heavy arm day, but a cardio session, and I knew something was wrong the second I walked out to the parking lot to get in my car. I was hit with intense nausea. And the nausea never let up for the rest of the day. The class was around 9 a.m. that morning, and the second I got into the car, I was struggling not to be sick. And the rest of the day, I just could not. I was trying to keep fluids down, and I knew something just at that point that I'd really overdone it. The next morning, I woke up and my arms were locked, and it was almost kind of comical because they were locked in, we joked I looked like a T-Rex. I could not straighten out my arms at all. And after a few days, I started getting intense swelling. My arms were very large, a lot of fluid built up. You could no longer see my elbows. And that's when I knew that something was more than just overdoing it. And I went in to see my PCP. She ran tests, but thought at that point it was going to be rhabdo, so she put a rush on the labs and called me that night to tell me to go to the hospital, that my CK levels were in critical range and I needed to be hospitalized. So at that point, I went in and checked into the local hospital, and they got me right in and admitted. And throughout that hospital visit, which I believe was for 5 days, they ran some testing, and they never actually mentioned anything with my EKGs. I actually found on my portal where they had done the EKGs and uploaded the reports to my patient portal, and there were multiple issues that were flagged on my EKG, and they never brought it up. And when I asked about it, they said, oh, it's probably just due to the rhabdo, and you need to just follow up with your doctor. So at that point, I followed up. Once I was, they give fluids while you're in the hospital with rhabdo, monitor your CK levels, make sure that those are trending downward, and they were. So they ended up releasing me. And the following Monday, I had an appointment with my PCP. And when I brought up the issues with my EKG, she said, we'll go ahead and just repeat one in office. I'm sure it's nothing. And they repeated it, and it came back with some abnormalities. So at that point, they got me in with a cardiologist. And it was actually several months. This episode happened in August of 2022. I don't believe I got in with a cardiologist until 2023 before they could get me into an appointment. They ran a bunch of tests at that point. They did a CT scan, they did an echocardiogram, they did stress tests, things like that. And it was found on the CT, I did have what they diagnosed as Pectus excavatum, which is where your sternum is caving inward, and it can in turn put pressure on the heart, lungs, and kind of move things around in there. And they did say that I had some abnormalities with my EKG. But at that point, they said the abnormality with the EKG was just something that I was born with. And my heart just functioned a little bit different than what was textbook normal, but they said it was my normal. But they just happened to find the Pectus excavatum on the CT and said, it's listed as severe, but it doesn't seem to be affecting your heart in any way. They set me up with some additional testing to test my lung capacity, and all of that came back normal. And they said, this is just something you were born with and everything is fine. But I tend to not be okay with simple answers, and I always need to know why, which is a great thing and a bad thing sometimes. So I really just followed this path with Pectus because I knew that after doing my research that Pectus excavatum can continually get worse as you grow older. And if it was going to affect me any further, I wanted to know and I wanted to get it checked out. And at that point is when I reached out to a Pectus specialist at Mayo Clinic, and they set me up for a consultation and some additional further testing. And at that point, I flew to Mayo. They set me up with a long list of appointments to check various different things. And upon their testing, they did find, and I have no medical background, so I may butcher a little bit of the explanation in this, but what they did find is that my pectus is causing pressure and squeezing on the right side of my heart. And when it does that, when you're exercising, of course, your heart kind of does a couple of different things. Your heart rate increases, so your heart beats faster to pump things, move blood around. And your blood pressure rises, your heart expands and contracts harder to try to pump that blood flow through your body, because your body needs more oxygen and blood flow when you're exercising and when you have an increase in activity. And with mine being so suppressed on that one side, my heart rate goes up, but I never get to that point where I tire out before I can ever get to a point beyond that. I've never been able to hit that next phase of exercise without restriction and, me physically not being able to do it. And their explanation kind of was that, I don't have any room in my chest for my heart to do what it's supposed to do.
Okay. So interesting. And it kind of makes sense because blood enters the heart from the right side.
Correct.
And so if something's pressing on the right side, that's limiting the amount of blood and oxygen and nutrients that can get to the right side, which means you're limited in what you can get out of the left side.
Correct.
Which is going to decrease your exercise performance and make you work even harder. And that could set up a nasty cycle where rhabdo could become more apparent.
Right. So, at this point, I am limited on what I can do as far as cardio and things like that, because not knowing how my body will continue to react without that extra ability to function normally during exercise, I'm limited on what I can do at the moment.
Was this your first incidence of rhabdo that you experienced in 2020?
This was my first diagnosed incidence with rhabdo, and by far, I do suspect that in the past I have had more minor occurrences of rhabdo because I've always tried to exercise. There were days where, and periods of time where I was going to the gym every morning and really trying to do what I could to exercise. And there were days where I would do a more intense workout than I was used to, and it would take me days to recover. I would struggle to walk. I would struggle to lift things up, and in my mind, I really overdid it. But looking back now, one of the things that really stood out to me is the way that my overall body felt with rhabdo. It's almost like you've been poisoned. I mean, your whole body just feels awful and almost feverish a little bit. Looking back, I remember having those, a little bit of just all over feeling horrible after workouts and really struggling to move around. And so although I thought that was just, normal. I overdid it, and I never actually went and saw anyone about it. But looking back, I do think those could have been more minor episodes with the rhabdo. I just, didn't put myself over the edge like I did in 2022.
You mentioned the T-Rex arms, and when I speak to people about Rhabdo, that's one of the things I normally bring up is that I always find it interesting how people who don't even know each other
Mhm.
say similar things.
Yes,
And T-Rex arms is one of the things that I have heard from many people
it
over the
is.
years,
Yeah.
and very short arms, and
Yes.
it's so amazing. And you were doing a cardio class when this happened, you
Yes.
said?
Yes, it was with a focus on arms. So they have different things that they do throughout the week, leg day, but it's all cardio based with a focus on things. And it was a focus on arms that day.
So you were doing some sort of resistance training, but it was in a cardio capacity. Lots of reps, not a lot of rest.
Yes.
All right, that
Yes.
explains for people who may be wondering, how did cardio cause these T-Rex arms and these arms swelling up? That makes perfect sense. A lot of reps, not a lot of weight, but you were doing some resistance, and that triggered the rhabdo. And you had flu-like symptoms, it sounds like, from what I'm gathering. That is also something that could arise from rhabdo. A lot of people, when they hear about rhabdo, they think, oh, kidney failure and muscle swelling and muscle pain. And not everybody has the classic trifecta of symptoms. Although
Correct.
it sounds like you had at least one of them with the pain and, the swelling, but no dark colored urine?
No. No,
Yeah.
I did not. And I think, maybe I helped that out because I've always associated high water intake with exercising. So I really prepared for that exercise. I drank a ton of water that morning and I sipped on water throughout the day. And then the next days following, when I was trying to recover, I just kept downing water because I knew that I had overdone it and that water would help. And maybe that helped out. But I have heard since that a lot of rhabdo cases, they don't have that classic kidney involvement or
Yeah.
the darkened urine.
Most people don't. And I like to bring that up because when I look at other people who talk about rhabdo, because, in the world of content economy, I talk about these things. And, you can see when it happens, the urine changes color and it gets people's attention. And so people gravitate towards that visual symptom. And I like to tell people, you can't use urine color as a litmus test for rhabdo because the majority of people may not actually even have that. So the only way to really know is what you did was go to your doctor and get the appropriate tests. And doctor was like, "Hey, you got rhabdo, you got to go to the hospital." I think is the best. You did the best thing, but you also brought up something which I think people need to hear more about: is that you were well hydrated before you took this class.
Yes.
In the world of fitness, and I would imagine if most personal trainers and fitness instructors aren't being taught about rhabdo, which is one of my pet peeves. And one of the reasons I like to do these things is to get this message out. But when they have heard about rhabdo, they often say, well, you got to drink a lot of water and you'll be okay. And as I've been saying for years, drinking water does not stop muscle fiber destruction. It doesn't stop rhabdo from occurring. And, you're more proof of this. You were well hydrated. You did this exercise class and you still got rhabdo. So again, you had this condition, this sunken chest pectineus, and I can't pronounce the last part of that. You did a better job than I did. And I won't even try to butcher that word. I butcher enough science words.
I do too.
Yeah.
I butchered it for quite a while before I learned the more medical term of Pectus excavatum. So
There you go. And again, that
I'm still saying it incorrectly too.
that's quite all right. People make fun of me of some of the things that I butcher. But maybe the pectineus extra whatever may have probably influenced this, but you were definitely did, but you were well hydrated. And so that
Yeah.
was a myth that I think people need to hear more about. Drinking water isn't going to prevent rhabdo. It may mitigate the effect on the kidneys, but it doesn't stop the process from occurring. And that's a message that needs to get out. I'm curious, after you came back from the Mayo Clinic, did they just say, hey, you got this pectineus thing and deal with it? Or did they give you any advice on how to do
So
this?
I am actually scheduled for surgery. Yes. So they have a couple different procedures that they can do for this depending on the severity. And the procedure that I'm having done it's actually scheduled in February. So it's upcoming and they will be placing 3 titanium bars up underneath the sternum and to kind of pull that sternum outward to give more room for the heart and lungs.
Okay. As I was looking into this, I did see surgery was an option, but then I also had seen that, maybe some exercises could help, deep breathing and maybe some strength training, but you're just going to, okay.
Yes. So and I think a lot of the medical community still considers the Pectus excavatum as just more of not necessarily a medical issue, more of just a surface issue. And it's not. It can cause a lot of problems, especially down the line as you age. And it's a little bit more difficult with adults. Normally, this is something that's caught in early childhood. It peaks during puberty, and it is hereditary. My son actually has it, so we are following him as well. So he is being followed with a cardiologist, and so it is. It's not just cosmetic like a lot of people think that it is. A lot of people think, oh, you can do some exercises and make the appearance better, but that is not, with Pectus, it's your bone structure is different. And so it's putting pressure, and without, medical intervention, it's going to continue that way or stay that way. So I would rather, in my situation, just try to do what we can. So
yeah, I think in your instance, I would do the same thing. And for people who have not seen this before, as I was researching this, the great oracle of knowledge, Wikipedia, does have a very impressive picture of this. And you see immediately what we're talking about here if you go there. But that's something that would show up, if you look at somebody like, wow, that's very, very, you can see it.
right.
You never noticed anything before this?
I had my suspicions that maybe something wasn't quite right, but it was not. I mean, if you look up pictures of Pectus excavatum, on Google and whatnot, typically you're going to get, of course, pictures of males, and it's much more obvious with that. I think the difficulty, it's much more difficult sometimes to diagnose in females, because when Pectus peaks and really shows up is during puberty. And the problem with that is, with females, we tend to grow, and that can be hidden depending on, your structure. And I was, from an early age, larger up top, and it was really, not something that I would have ever noticed. My doctors never said a word, never suspected it. As I got older, I did notice, especially after having kids, that bras just didn't quite sit right, and I couldn't ever get a proper fit. And I noticed some rib flaring. That's very common with Pectus. So as it kind of caves in, your ribs at the bottom will kind of flare outward a little bit. So that's common. And I've noticed those things, but it was never just something that you would look at me and think. Even friends that we've been on vacation with, seen me in bathing suits, like, I don't understand how yours could be that severe, but it can just be a little bit more difficult to see sometimes.
Sure. And I'm glad you mentioned that this is not just a cosmetic thing. And I'm a little surprised that some medical professionals would see it just cosmetic, because anything that's caving in and pressing on your heart and your lungs is not just cosmetic. It's going to affect your quality of life.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm so glad you went for a second opinion. And
Yes.
being your first advocate is really the best thing. Don't just listen to what someone says. Get a second opinion. As I've been saying for years, rhabdo is a perplexing and fascinating phenomenon. And once I heard about it, I just couldn't let it go. And here we are, well over a decade later, where I'm still talking about it. But yeah, it's so interesting that we still don't fully understand it, and all the things that can trigger it. And again, I've never come across this before, and I've been talking about this for a very long time. So what's the recovery from this surgery? Have they told you?
Yes, and the recovery is obviously going to be dependent on how healthy you are, how active you are going into it. They're thinking around 6 weeks. That also depends. Sometimes during surgery, ribs can break, things like that. A little barbaric sounding in some ways, but I think that I'm in the best hands that I could be with this surgery. So, and I'm on a strict exercise regimen, bypassing cardio, to try to get me as prepared as I can be for the surgery. So 6 weeks is what we're hoping. Some are walking on a treadmill within a few days. And so that's what we're planning on for now.
Can you let us in on what kind of exercises you're doing to prepare for this surgery?
Yes. So the Mayo Clinic is wonderful. They set you up. They set me up with a PT that gave me a list and worked with me through these exercises to make sure I understood everything. And they want me to build up my back muscles as much as possible, because when they're going to restructure, everything's going to be a little bit different, and they want my back muscles to be as strong as possible to help help with that. And they want me to not exercise my chest. So the exercises are focusing strictly on my back, no push-ups, no chest exercises, but they want me to also try to focus on my core as much as possible. Your back and your core being what you really need to maintain your posture. And so that's what I have a focus on for now.
I think that sounds perfectly fine to me. I mean, I would imagine they don't want you working your front of your muscles, but the back muscles sound great to improve your posture as
Daily
well.
stretches on the sternum, and try to keep that area as pliable maybe as possible for going into it, but build up everything else so that it can help compensate when everything's changed in there. So
The good news is you're very young, so now's the time to do it.
yes,
Yeah.
I imagine this surgery is not easy. They say it's pretty great with kids in that puberty age or early teens. Their recovery is a lot better, and as you age, that recovery gets harder and harder. So I feel like I'm at a good place.
It definitely sounds like you are. And you say you have a son who has this also.
Yes, he is 11, so he is being monitored. As for now, his is listed as mild, but we do know, of course, that peaks in puberty. So that is something that we're going to continue to watch. He does have, the stamina issues with exercise already. So he does struggle to keep up a little bit with his peers. He loves sports, but soccer is one of his dreams, but he's not really able to keep up on the field. So he's hoping that maybe in the future that changes.
Does his physical education teachers know about his condition?
They do. Fortunately, right now, it's not something that they, unless they're doing really intense things, it's not an issue. So currently, we're just kind of keeping an eye on it and
Okay. I think
see how it goes.
I think it's a good, and I'm glad his teachers are aware of it as well.
Yeah.
And I would say that you went to the gym, the exercise class, and you were exercising intensely. I would say that you don't have to exercise intensely to reap the benefits of exercise.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a message that needs to get out to people. There's a commercial that I continue to see on TV for a well-known gym chain, and it's a bunch of women, and they're exercising intensely.
Yes.
And it bugs me because it perpetuates that myth that you have to beat yourself into the ground to get benefits of exercise. And it's absolutely not what the case is.
Absolutely.
Multiple studies show that the body responds amazingly well to even a little bit of exercise without going too deep into the woods. So you don't need to do multiple sets and run marathons and all that. So, that's a message that I think the gym world doesn't really want to talk about too much.
And unfortunately, from what I found, a lot of, like you said, trainers and stuff, they are not even familiar with Rhabdo, which I think is a shame. More trainers and people in that physical wellness industry need to know, and need to know what to look for. That's something that even the doctors in the hospital have said they're seeing an uptick in Rhabdo cases from these high intensity. We live in a world where we want to do as much in as little time as possible. So these high intensity 30 to 45 minute classes are great when we have busy schedules, but it can have an impact on your health.
Yeah, it's not being taught in the colleges, and if it's not being taught in the colleges, it's not trickling down to the people who write the personal trainer textbooks, which means it's not getting taught at that level either, which is another reason I would plug my book, The
Yes.
first book in the world on rhabdo. I keep talking about it, and I wish they would all read it because it's not in the textbooks. And if it is, it's covered very superficially,
Right.
which, again, they don't talk about the myths and stuff like that. But I think things are getting better. I know there was at least one bill that was circulating through the Texas legislature to add rhabdo to the list of catastrophic injuries that coaches and PE teachers need to be aware of.
That's good.
And it was introduced by one of the senators in Texas after a couple of incidents that happened a year or two ago, one involving a middle school student. Unfortunately, it did not become law, and I don't know why, but things are slowly changing, hopefully for the better. But I would agree there does appear to be an uptick in rhabdo, and I don't know the rate of rhabdo in the general population because nobody's tracking it, unfortunately. CDC does not track it in the general population. To my knowledge, only the U.S. military is actively tracking rhabdo cases. It is, but
Especially even this was probably a few months after I had a nurse reach out to me on Facebook, and she was asking me about my incident because she ended up with rhabdo after going to the same place that I did. And, it's definitely becoming a little bit more known, but not nearly as much as it should be within that industry.
yeah, it's an uphill battle, but I don't mind keep talking about it, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast to talk about this, and you shed light on this. Yeah, yeah. We're just pushing the needle forward, and
Yes,
hopefully education, best defense against rhabdo.
it is.
I can't thank you enough for talking about this. I know you're helping a lot of people. And do you have any final words of wisdom for people who, may be dealing with the same condition you are? And
The main thing I think is to keep advocating for yourself. Get that second, third opinion. A lot of people are diagnosed with things, and it is what it is, but there's so much that's just unknown that, you just need to keep advocating for yourself and keep pushing for answers, and taking it easy.
yeah, I think that's a great thing. We put a lot of emphasis on, the blood test says I'm okay, but I feel off. Don't
Yes.
just go by the blood test or any other test. Be your advocate. Go and get a second opinion, third opinion until somebody can give you an answer to why you're not feeling the way you are, or you're not being able to do, in your case, the physical activity that you thought you would be able to do. So yeah, I think that's a great thing. I'll be praying for you when you have your surgery. I know you're going to come through fine, but still, prayers don't hurt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate everything that you're doing with the Rhabdo community, and every bit of information helps.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.